When somebody's been sexually betrayed, they're decimated, they're flattened, and they don't know even how to stand up. They don't even know how to fight for themselves or those they love. When I begin to care in the community for women who have experienced this, and we are starting to fortify them, we are helping them get their truth back on. We are validating the crazy making. We are starting to make sense of what's going on. This is how I literally feel. I feel
Welcome to Homeward. I am Jim Burns, and I'm actually smiling today because I'm so excited about our guest, but I'm also very much aware that this subject is not something that some of your little kids might need to hear. But you know what? We all need to hear this as adults. Today we're talking about hope. We're going to talk about help and a way forward from someone who has been there. And you say, well, what is being there? Why is that there? Well, being there means that we're talking about sexual betrayal. And it's such an important subject. We've not talked much about it on the Homeward broadcast. Dr. Sheri Denham Keffer is with us today. And I have deep respect for her. And not only does she have a most compelling story herself of pain and suffering and dealing with sexual betrayal, actually from a ministry perspective. Her spouse was in ministry. But she has an incredible ministry now that has brought wholeness and healing, as it has for her, to many others. Never perfect, because again, when somebody has been sexually betrayed, it is a tough, tough thing, and there's always going to be kind of a hole in your heart. And so we're going to talk about how to make that not totally go away, but we're going to talk about it. So if you are a person, or you know someone who is a person who has been lied to about sexual addiction, about pornography, about sexting, about having an affair, and 100 other things around that subject, then you will want to listen today. If you aren't one of those people, then you also want to listen because you know somebody. When you start looking at the statistics and what's going on in our nation and around the world, and people on the podcast listen all around the world, then you know that we all know somebody, and we all know somebody who needs this. Perhaps you're dealing firsthand with this, and perhaps you're not, but you're going to receive a lot of help today. Okay. Sheri is one of the experts in the field. She is the author of a great book if you're watching on the YouTube channel, you can see it here. It's called Intimate Deception, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. I was teasing with Sheri, and I'll introduce her in a moment, but I was teasing with her because I was reading it on the way home from speaking this weekend in Austin, Texas, and I was like, oh my gosh, I need like a brown paper bag because it says Intimate Deception, and it's talking about sexual betrayal. Isn't it interesting that even those of us who don't live this world, but it's embarrassing. The subject of talking about sexuality is embarrassing. The subject of talking about betrayal is it's just hard to sometimes talk. That's why in a book I wrote for kids, the first chapter was called Awkward because it was on sexual integrity. So this could be, I don't think it's going to be awkward. I know and trust and believe in her. But at the same time, it's not an easy subject. Okay, Sheri is also a co-host on the nationally syndicated talk show New Life Live. I was actually on it today, and that's 2 million people, listeners, a week. It's just incredible, and she does such an amazing job. Also, she is the founder of BraveOne.com. Now, I just went to that, BraveOne.com, and looked at it, and it's amazing. I'm going to let her talk about it at the end, so you got to go through the whole podcast because you're going to hear more about it. If you don't get through the podcast this moment, but you need it, then all of the information is in our show notes. So it's BraveOne.com. I highly, highly recommend it. That's actually a community for women who are moving from devastating pain to finding hope. Okay, as well as women who stopped being manipulated because that's part of sexual betrayal, and they now know the truth, and they have felt worthless, and now there is hope, and they believe that they are enough. So anyway, great information on BraveOne.com. But I want to get to the podcast, of course. Sheri, welcome to the podcast. So great to have you with us.
I'm honored to be here with you.
Well, you know that I've tried to get you for a long time on this podcast. I finally got you, so I'm excited about this. But again, the subject is a tough one, sexual betrayal. It's what we're talking about today, and it's a difficult subject. You live in this world. You have lived this world as well. So first of all, just give us a quick definition of sexual betrayal. I think it's a larger and broader definition than a lot of us think about.
Yeah, sexual betrayal is when somebody acts out in a way that is non-consenting, that would violate your sexuality together.
Right.
You come into relationships, and you don't get into a relationship typically to have somebody sexually betray you. People ask me all the time, what is that?
Yeah.
Pornography is sexual betrayal.
Sure.
Cyber sex is sexual betrayal. Any kind of emotional, relational, sexual acting out. There's so many different types now. I mean, there's even now sexual extortion, which is becoming a big thing.
Incredible.
For those that are out there looking at pornography, they can get hooked in a sexual extortion ring and give a lot of money because they don't want to be exposed. So there's lots of layers. But the big deal is really, Jim, it has to do with consent. Yeah. Consent is, hey, I am thinking about going and look at pornography. I am coming to you to let you know about that. That's consent, getting your feedback. If you say, no, I'm not in agreement, okay, that makes sense. But what happens is they build a secret sexual basement that you don't know about. So you're coming home, they're helping you with the kids and homework, maybe even making dinner together. But what you don't know is they go down into the secret sexual basement where they act out in some capacity. And they come up and it seems like everything's fine. You don't know. But what's really interesting, and we can talk more about this if you want, but our body, we have two brains. We have our first brain is here, right, in our head. Sure. And then we have our second brain, which is actually our gut. It's our intuition and gut instincts. And so just like if you have mold growing in a basement and people start somaticizing, their body starts getting sick, it's the same way with intimate deception. Sure. You might begin to pick up on these subtle clues that something isn't quite right. Maybe what they're doing with their phone, they're turning it over, or maybe how they're treating you sexually. There might be some changes going on, maybe things that they're asking you to do that you're not comfortable with. There's all kinds of how they look at women, right? And you're starting to feel uncomfortable, but you just don't know what's going on, and hence, intimate deception. They're not consenting. They're lying to you, and they've got a separate world that you're unaware of.
It's so interesting you said that. And later I'm going to ask you a question about you personally, because you said you had two worlds going. And there was a divide, like a cement divide, not a real cement divide, but you were living two worlds. And so you know this well, even personally. Let me ask you, though, a question. About a woman comes to you. This happens to you probably several times a day, and especially on braveone.com. But a woman comes to you and she goes, I think something, my gut, not their brain, but their gut says, maybe my husband is looking at porn. I knew he did, but I think he's kind of done. Or he told me that he used to, but it's not a problem anymore. Or I just have this feeling, I work on Tuesdays. This was on the New Life show today. I work on Tuesday nights, and my husband was never home on Tuesday nights. Come to find out, he was with another woman.
Wow.
So she didn't want to say it's it's an affair. So they come to you and they don't know, but they just sense it. What do you say to them?
There's so much shame around looking. There's two things that I think happen for 100% of us. Two things. There is denial that pops up, and that's where I lived with Connor, my first husband. I tapped it down, honestly, because I found out about it, but I didn't really want to go deeper because it would cost so much in our relationship. So I went to him and said, hey, I found pornography. And he did exactly what you said. He said, oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah, I looked. I won't do it anymore. And I Because if somebody said it was hurting me and they were upset,
Right.
I would stop that behavior. So we kind of project onto them
Yeah.
how we would behave in that situation. And we knowingly or unknowingly let them off the hook and hope for the best.
Yeah.
That's denial,
Yeah.
right? It's the secret we keep from ourselves. I think the other thing is there's tremendous shame around looking.
Yes.
And the first thing I'll ask her, I said, so how do you know? What's going on in your body? What are you picking up on? What have you observed?
Yeah.
What discoveries have you made? And they'll share just a few things, like where it kind of surfaced above the water. And then I say, well, would you consider looking? And I get a couple different reactions. I get, no, I'm not that kind of woman. I don't do that. I don't like. I'm above that, right? They don't say it, I'm above it. They just say, I just wouldn't do that.
Yeah,
it's
me.
not who I am,
Sure.
right? Or they say, I'm scared to know. But what I encourage them to do, I say, I understand how scary it is to actually look. Let me peel back the shame from you, because I call it a truth-seeking mission.
Interesting.
How are you going to know what is going on in that secret sexual basement? How are you going to know the truth if somebody's hiding it, deceiving you?
Mm-hmm.
They know what they're doing. It's not that no one's, twisting their arm or holding a gun to their head. They make choices.
Right.
And they're keeping it from you. And they're in self-deception. They're telling themselves, well, I could never let her know this, or I don't want to hurt her. This would blow her up. I have to protect her. They tell themselves all kinds of things in order to give themselves a permission slip to continue the behavior. So the truth-seeking mission is really where things start to kind of come into the light.
Right.
The Bible talks about we can't heal what's in the dark. We can't deal what's in the dark. We can only deal what's in the light. And that usually is the thing that opens the door for some more help, more inquiry, more concern, and having to deal with what you now know.
Yeah, interesting. And it's fascinating you said that. And I want to get into the body also, because you actually wrote in Intimate Deception. This is one of the things that I kept hearing over and over again. You talk about your body and how your body either knows or your body goes through almost a PTSD type of an experience. And I want to get to that. But I want our listeners to hear a little bit of your story behind the story. You kind of talked about it. So this is not just something where you as a therapist are writing out of your knowledge of counseling with people. You experienced intimate deception. You experienced sexual betrayal, and you actually experienced it in the church. Your husband was in ministry while all this was going on. So people didn't assume that was the case. So tell us a little bit about your story.
Yeah, you never think that your story is going to be what you're talking about with you, Jim. I mean, this because of all of the shame that I felt in the discovery of it, and going back to school as a part of my I call my do-over phase. Going back to become a therapist, I thought I can't even tell my story then because no one will want to come to see me. They'll, But this is the weird thing is God is using. My marriage was a casualty, sadly, but my life hasn't been that. But let's go back to the beginning. Connor and I dated long distance for a year and got married. Now, I grew up in a home where there was severe mental illness and heartbreaking things.
Yeah. Wow.
And so I honestly had a healthy fear of getting close to others because I figured if they would find out about the mental illness, if they would hear more about my story, and if they knew about the chaos in my home, they wouldn't want me. They wouldn't pick me. And the mental illness was so severe that I even had a guy that I was dating at one point that said, I can't date you because you might actually have a child with that kind of mental illness. And so he broke up with me, which was devastating. A lot of shame. Dating long distance for a year. Now that I look back on it, it kind of worked for me and it worked for him. because we never were in the same area for a period of time. And so there weren't the natural conversations, or we were always excited to see each
even
other.
conflict.
Always up.
The conflict of going about life mundane because you guys were doing that. Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. So I knew about one thing, Jim, is that he had called a 900 number line, which it's a sex line.
Yeah,
now,
you wrote about that.
I was so naive. I didn't know what that was. I was in Bible college. I'm like, a sex line? What is a sex line? And I thought maybe it was just some recording, but it wasn't. It's a real person. And he told me about it, and I was upset, of course, and asked his brother about it. Asked some people that I was on campus with, and his brother basically said, if probably every guy on campus has called. It was minimized. Now, I minimized it because I decided to forgive Connor. I thought, well, look at my life. I'm not perfect. Even though we saved ourselves from marriage, I knew that there's many things that I've done wrong. And so I decided to forgive Connor, tucked it away, patted it down, and asked a few more questions. And he did share a little bit about sexual history, which was concerning, an STD that he had gotten. So I did have more information.
Right.
But again, I just forgave him and went forward. What happened is that in the first year of our marriage, he would pull away from me. Now, this isn't always the case with people that are compulsively sexually acting out or have a porn addiction, but there was an aversion to me touching him. So he didn't like when I rubbed my fingers through his hair. He didn't like when, he always said I talked with my hands. And if any of you are watching me on your station, you'll see that I'm talking with my hands. That's what I do. But he said that's what made him and repulsed him. And so we went into therapy once we found out about the pornography. And I literally was sitting there in our therapist office, sitting on
your hands.
Because I was trying to do everything I could to not make him pull away from me. But you know what that is? I know now. It's gaslighting.
Yeah.
He was putting it on me.
Yes.
In order for me to believe there was something wrong with me, in order to continue covering up what he was doing.
Yeah, and does that, you write about gaslighting in the book, of course, but gaslighting, that's really a norm when somebody is betraying their spouse sexually.
Yeah.
They try to gaslight.
Yeah, and it's not like they think about, I'm going to gaslight her. It is the norm. It's a part of, along with that sexual acting out, no matter what that is, there is also an integrity disorder.
Yeah.
So in the integrity disorder, there is the lying, there is the hiding, there's lies of omission. There's, you're coming to them and they're bull-faced looking at you saying, I've never did that. Right. All of that, gaslighting is a part of that. And gaslighting is when somebody strategically twists the truth to make you believe something is wrong with you or that you're crazy in order to have you not look at what they're actually doing over here.
Right.
And it does go hand in hand. And so when you begin to feel like the crazy making is going on, it's a horrible feeling when they tell you, you're just being jealous. I don't know what's wrong with you. Right. Or you haven't been really with me lately. And you've been with the kids too much. And so, I just got to have my needs met somehow. They may not tell you how, and that's not even the truth because it doesn't matter what the issue is. Right. Sexual deception in any form is harmful. And to your point, 76% of the women in my research showed symptoms of post-traumatic stress.
Yes.
That's serious business. That means it's impacting your brain, your body, your heart, your mind, your mental health. That's the same kind of thing that, soldiers get when they come back, male or female soldiers that are out serving, they come back and they're dealing with symptoms of post-traumatic
Yeah,
stress. Well,
right.
that happens to us in all of this.
And it hits our every aspect of our life. It was interesting because I read that in your book about PTSD and post-traumatic stress, and I thought, well, what about the other 25%? Because it seems that would be just so normal. If I put myself in those shoes, thank God, Kathy and I have been married 50 years. That's not our story. We got other stories, but that's not our story. I would go into that. I would go into this incredible stress thing. At the same time, and I'm going to bring back your story in a minute, but at the same time, in your book, you really do it's a hopeful book. You know, that's what's great.
Yep.
And what I really appreciated about it. Your story is a hopeful story, even in the midst of, some pretty crummy stuff. And one of the things you said at the beginning of the book is, a life changed is a life won. What did you mean by that?
It's crazy, Jim. I honestly see it this way. When somebody's been sexually betrayed, they're decimated, they're flattened, and they don't know even how to stand up. They don't even know how to fight for themselves or those they love. When I begin to care in the community for women who have experienced this, and we are starting to fortify them, we are helping them get their truth back on. We are validating the crazy making. We are starting to make sense of what's going on. This is how I literally feel. I feel like I'm pulling them out of this incredible cesspool, which I'll tell you right now, I hate the porn industry.
Yeah.
I think the porn industry is actually the gateway drug for our kids, for relationships. We've got, I get phone calls from moms that their 7 or 8 year old found it, and they're acting out with another child what they saw, monkey see, monkey do.
Yeah, exactly.
And so I'm pulling out that woman out of that cesspool, but guess what? I'm also pulling out her kids and the one who's sexually acting out that is caught in this.
Yes.
That ancient Hebrew word for lust is ava, which means the strong nail that hooks it to yourself.
Wow.
That strong nail is lust. The same word, it's a derivative, it's kave, is what comes after the nail.
Yeah.
That's hope, what comes after the nail. So as I'm pulling her out, her kiddo's attached, and then the one who's sexually acting out, that is hooked to the nail of lust through the sexual acting out, that is a life won. And it's not just one, it's a system of change. And I am seeing women all the time being the ones that are like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, throwing a stake into that wheel of crazy making and stopping what's going on in their home because they're warriors. We're Ezer warriors. We were named after God as, Ezer warriors. We are warrior companions of fierce strength. And we're pulling our families out of this. But the thing is like me, I didn't know what to do. There was no path. There was, I was so shamed about it. I didn't know who to talk to. And so I didn't do anything.
Sure.
I just put my hands over my eyes like this.
No.
For, 4 years, I was the queen of denial. I didn't want to know. There's a term called betrayal blindness. It's when we basically are closing our eyes because it's the secret we're keeping from ourselves. I didn't want to know. But if I'm like this and somebody is in deception, Jim, there is a whole lot of bad juju that is happening in that home because neither one is actually looking. And the father of lies is having all kinds of a heyday in that family. And I really feel like the enemy is taking families by deceit. And so, thank the Lord that he has taken my story, one woman, and now is beginning to make fish and loaves of that so that other families can heal, so that women, men, and kids can heal around this.
So that's a great word. Listen, we're going to have to take a quick break. We're going to be right back. Dr. Sheri Denham Keffer is with us today. We're talking about her book, by the way, and take a look at it if you're looking on the YouTube channel, Intimate Deception. It is really good, and I love the subtitle, Healing the Wounds of Sexual Betrayal. Okay. And again, all of that information, all the information about Sheri, it's in our podcast notes. At the very end of this, we're going to let her talk a little bit more about how you can connect. If you are, like what she just said, there is great healing and there is great hope. And it's not easy to take that first step. I mean, sometimes people go, oh, just take the step. I get it, because she just said 4 years of shame, lots of tough stuff. You got to unpack some really crummy things. But before freedom comes pain. And so we're not asking you to come into freedom and hope and it's going to be all lovely. You may have to experience some pain, but in that pain, you need to have people around you who can help you get through that. And by the way, she said one other thing that I thought was really interesting. She said that with her, even with children, if you don't do this for you, do it for your children, okay? Because, sometimes what we understand is that if we're not getting well, then we inherit the sins of a previous generation, the third and fourth generation. Well, sometimes we talk about sins, but we inherit even some of the trauma that's taken place in our life. And so, you can change the trajectory of your family when you go and get some help. Okay, so let's take a quick break. We'll be right back. When we come back, I want to talk a little bit more about her life and how she kind of had, during this really tough time, she pretty much had two lives going at the same time. And that seems very natural, but I want to see how she kind of got out of that. Okay, we'll be right back. Don't go away. I'm Jim Burns.
I'm Erin Mashaw, and I want to invite you into an honest conversation about one of life's most awkward yet important topics, sex.
Conversations about sex can bring up all kinds of weird emotions, not the least of which is awkward. But that's not a reason to avoid the topic altogether.
So, if everybody's doing it, then what's the big deal?
Where do you go with your questions? There are lots of voices telling you who you are, how to dress, what to think, how to feel. So how do we know what to listen to? Who can we trust to guide us?
When we treat others with radical respect, we honor God, we make our lives and relationships better, and we reflect God's love to the world all around us.
Now, I know you might be thinking, what? I don't need guardrails. I have good intentions, but what if intention isn't enough?
And as you think about the path from where you are now to where you want to be, who are the friends that can help you get there?
You'll hear personal stories, helpful advice, and truth from the Bible about how to make wise choices when it comes to love, sex, and dating.
Imagine being able to look back on this stage of your life without regrets about the way you handled relationships. You're not going to get there by accident. You're going to have to decide in advance what guardrails to put in place to get to where you want to be.
Join us for a student's guide to sexual integrity.
Welcome back. I'm Jim Burns. Incredible conversation. I just said to Sheri during your break that maybe we're walking on holy ground and there's some people who can make some decisions that could be life-changing for them and then literally, like I said, could change the trajectory of your family as well. Hey, by the way, you probably, if this is not you, you know somebody who needed to hear this conversation. You can send this on. That's the great thing about podcast, about the YouTube channel. You can just send it on to somebody else and let them listen or watch this. Sheri, you said that you had two separate selves. I mean, I circled and underlined this part of your book. And you were divided by what you called a thick cement wall, not a literal cement wall, but that's what it felt like. On one side is what everyone saw. I mean, you were in the church. You were working in the church. I mean, they knew who you were and they knew your husband and whatnot. The other side of the wall is what you hid from them. What was that like for you?
Whew. Makes me want to cry just talking about it because it was so hard. It took so much energy for me to keep myself together.
Yeah.
Being a pastor's wife, right? We had staff in our house that would come. Yeah. We would have Bible studies. We'd pray. And, I was at this place, I remember we had this little tiny round table in our kitchen that I would have potato chips and, cookies or whatever that I made so they could come over and we'd hang out together a bit with some food. And I remember looking at that table and it was so coiffed. It just, perfect bowl, chocolate chips. But they didn't know that morning I literally couldn't figure out what to put on to wear.
Right.
Because I looked in the mirror. I despised my body. I felt like it wasn't enough.
Right.
I was being exchanged for all these other images. I wasn't sleeping at night. My heart was absolutely broken. In fact, talk about a split screen. My body got so shut down, Jim, in all of this and not saying anything in this season of, the queen of denial and her chip bowl. And I'm not beating myself up at all. I'm just saying it's crazy to live two different lives.
Right.
But I shut down. I stopped showering.
Yeah.
And it was, I think, my body's defense to protect myself. I became depressed.
Sure.
But the reason I knew I stopped showering, it's not because I smelled myself, because it was several weeks. Connor came to me and he said, and he was really nice, respectful. He said, hey, I just noticed it's been a while since you've taken a shower. And I hadn't even thought about it.
Right.
I went, you're right. And so that part of, no one knew that on church staff.
Sure.
No one knew that I was dying in my marriage. No one knew when we would have people in or we would minister to families. We looked like Ken and Barbie. And, we were at a camp, and I remember this little gal coming up to me, and I was so down and depressed at that point that I wasn't even going to eat dinner with the other people at a church retreat. It was a, summer camp. I was so down at that point that I stayed in my cabin. And I had a little gal who I met, and she knocked on the cabin door, and she came to me, and she just said, hey, Miss Sheri, I would love you to come and have dinner tonight. And I said, honey, I'm just not feeling well. And my heart wasn't, but I was faking it. I just didn't have the strength to live another day in this lie of the split screen. And so she just said, well, okay. Well, I just wanted you to know I love Connor. He's so great. He just is he's such a good man, and I hope I marry somebody like him someday. I literally, you could have taken a 2x4 to my face.
Right.
I felt this, and I wanted to scream, no, don't.
Wow.
That is the extent of what people didn't know in our lives, in our marriage. And it just got to a point where I was so depressed about it that I ended up sharing. And as I shared with a dear friend, colleague, another pastor on staff, that was when the dominoes started falling very quickly. And we were called into the pastor's office to begin to get honest about what was going on. And
well, that was a courageous thing for you to do. It was the right thing to do for you. It's not easy. And I think there's a lot of people who get to a place, just like that little girl coming to you, saying that, you being depressed and not able to, even go eat in the room or whatever. But the answer is we've got to reveal the truth, don't we?
Yeah, I know. It's hard.
No, it is.
But, the truth will set you free,
Yeah.
right? But it's really scary to do that when you know that revealing that is going to create some change.
Right. Yeah. And sometimes those changes, they're changes for, the person who is betraying you, but it's also major changes for you. And sometimes people go, well, I don't have the money. I'm worried about that. Where would I live? What would I do? How would this look? Whatever, the shame factor. But, like I said at the beginning of this podcast, before freedom comes pain. And sometimes we have to face that pain. Nobody wants to do that. It's kind of the pain of discipline or the pain of regret. You're going to have pain. So, you just jump into it.
And there's a lot more available today, Jim, which is very different than when I was, going through this, which I'm grateful for. But, we when we shared with our church staff, we might as well have had leprosy because people didn't know what to do with us. They didn't know how to talk about us. They sent us away to a place where we were there for 6 weeks or so, for pastors and wives with issues.
Right.
But it wasn't a place that specialized in porn addictions or sexual acting out and all of that.
No, and that's an important thing to say to people, that somehow when we finally start trying to go through the wholeness thing, they need help with a specialist who can do the kinds of things that you can do, because a lot of people are just not qualified to do it. No offense to them. They have other things. I wouldn't be qualified. If somebody came to me and gave me that story, I can sure love on them. I can kind of pastor them. I have enough knowledge of my own abilities and non-abilities to go, I need to refer them to somebody who's a specialist. You mentioned in the kind of final part of this story, that you and your ex got married. I mean, got divorced. You and your ex got divorced.
Right.
And I would imagine that that's a whole lot. The majority of people, that's the case. You and I both know people where they went through this and they stayed married. They restored it, which is, I look at it as great of a miracle as Jesus walking on water. I think that's a pretty cool miracle of Jesus doing that, but this may even be, in my scale of miracles, even a greater miracle. So you see this. You work with people. Some, end up the best thing for them to do, the safest thing, the right thing, is to take the biblical way out and divorce, but others seem to restore. What is it that helps them restore? What did they do?
Great question. Well, let me just start with a little bit of research. While I asked these betrayed partners, while both of these things are horrible, the sexual acting out that you know about, right? And there was everything from child pornography all the way to sexual affairs and everything in between.
Right.
Or the continued patterns of lies.
Yeah.
You know what I see people divorcing over? It's the continued patterns of lies.
Isn't that interesting?
It's that it continues on. It's that additional integrity piece to the sexual acting out. So what we do, and I'm telling you, it's a path to truth. We do something, and it's these. I'm a certified sex addiction therapist, a certified partner trauma therapist. It's a lot more than what we have time on this show. But basically, there's something called a therapeutic full disclosure, and we use a polygraph.
Yeah, right.
Fidelity polygraph.
Right, okay.
That's like a come to Jesus, because no one really wants to get to the truth. Now, we as betrayed partners want to know the truth. Once we get past that place of not, we want to know so we can consent and make decisions about our, what we want. Is this person going to restore or not? Are they going to get honest? Are they going to do the work?
Right.
And those that I see that honestly want to repair the marriage, those that are sexually acting out, because I work with them too, they're scared out of their mind. They are so afraid that their world is going to blow up.
Right.
Now, in that process, when you're cared about, it's a sacred healing process. When you're going through that with people that are trained, this is what's crazy. In the 90 percentile, people end up getting healing and changing and staying.
Wow.
Now, why is that?
Are you saying the 90 percentile? Because I misspoke then, because I just assumed it's over 50% would get a divorce. But you're saying
that's people that aren't doing anything.
That aren't doing the work. Got it.
We're talking about you just are out there, you're hoping for the best, you're wishing things like continue to go on. The sexual acting out, porn may be the gateway drug that they found when they were 9, 13, 15 years old. That's been there. You just didn't know it was there.
Right.
I know that because of therapeutic full disclosures now. Oftentimes they bring it into the marriage. It's just you didn't know about it.
Right.
But that just doesn't stay stagnant. It just continues often to grow. And I'm not saying this to scare everybody. Please, this is not about that. This is a conversation about intervention and about somebody coming out of that muck and mire.
Right.
When they get on a healthy path, there's even research by a group of professionals on disclosures, therapeutic full disclosures, that even though half of them said, I don't want to do that, and both on both sides, both the one who's acting out and the significant other, then after they did it, 93% and 95% of them were glad that they did it, because they're out of that.
Yeah.
They are now in a place of freedom,
Yeah.
and they've gotten into the right types of
Yeah.
groups and counseling, and they're
Yeah.
dealing with the trauma that's underneath all this sludge, and
Yeah.
and so they're free. They're actually free men.
Yeah, isn't that interesting? That's
They're free.
such an interesting sight. Well, and even I was just thinking of a Bible verse that says, "Confess your sins to one another and be healed." And we don't tend to think that that's what you could go to somebody else to confess. I mean, you go to God to confess the sins, but when it says one another, so when you're confessing some of that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
I am shocked because we're past time. There's so much more I want to talk to you about. We've got to bring you back sometime if you don't mind.
I would love that. I would love that.
So good, and I'm already prepped because I have way more questions than I have time to do that. But I do want to ask you because we've only touched the surface today about your amazing work, and I have a profound respect, and I have people in my life who you've helped greatly. But there are people who are listening or watching right now who are asking, how can I learn more about this? This was the catalyst for them to take that step, and it's not an easy step. Mm-hmm. So I want them to hear about what you do and your work. Where can they go for help? So give us the shot.
So it's called the Brave One Community, and I created it because my book came out right before COVID. We had a pandemic, which also became a porndemic. Yeah. And so I had women reaching out to me that got my book but didn't know how to find help. And that was the biggest problem. They didn't have a roadmap for healing. So what I've done, I rolled up my sleeves, and with a dear friend of mine, we created a virtual ark of sorts, and it's called the Brave One Community. Yeah. It's for women that have experienced some kind of sexual betrayal, and I have what's called the Brave One Journey. It's a step-by-step process where we're going to help you deal with when you start, which I call ground zero. That's D-Day. That's when you find out about this. And we move you step by step through the body, through shame beliefs, getting your truth back on, through talking about what to do with relationships. I go through, which I think is a must-have, the truth and safety. We've got to have the two pillars all the way to fierce strength. That's step 8, because I do see us as Ezers. And when women go through this program with me, they actually become very strong. I have a whole boundaries thing that I do in the community that's geared at sexual acting out. It's not just some type of, and Dr. John Townsend actually worked with me to make a 4-step model that he has specific for us.
Awesome.
And so I am seeing change, and I'm seeing change and healing. And that's the only reason I'm continuing to do this. Yeah. It's hard work, but it's important work. Yeah. And it's redemptive work. Yeah. And when I see a woman's life changed and her family changed, I just go, and that's where they get started, where you can get started is just at the Brave One Community. And in fact, I would love to give you a free month just to check it out. If you go to braveone.com/homeward, so it's braveone.com/HOMEWORD, you can get a free month just because of this podcast and your generosity
and people,
to those that are listening.
Yeah, people, you've got to do that. Sheri, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
You're an amazing person. You're doing a great work. Thousands of people are being helped by you. You don't have to do it. There's other things you could be doing, but you're giving your talent and your God-given talent and your insight to literally make tremendous change. So thank you so much.
You're so welcome.
So again, I want to just say to you, the book is called Intimate Deception, and we're showing it on the YouTube again. Buy the book. And again, if this is your story, please do it, okay? And then also go to braveone.com, and there's all the information. If you forget this, you're driving in the car, you can't write it down, no sweat. It's in our podcast notes. It's both on the YouTube channel and it's on all the podcast platforms. So, you can get there, and what a gracious gift to give that. It's an awesome thing. By the way, I looked at it. It was just awesome. Now, as you know, I usually close by telling a story, or I close by my step, but not today. We just touched the surface. I mean, my goodness, we could have had this as a long form podcast for 3 hours. But I want to talk to you out of her book. She has something that I really like, and it's called 8 Steps to Taking Your Truth Back. It's a great point. I'm just going to name the steps, but this may help you get thinking about this. First of all, seek wise counsel. The Bible says where there's no counsel, the people fall in the multitude of counselors, there is safety. Number 2, don't isolate. It's so natural to isolate. Sheri talked about this. You're going to isolate. You're not going to want to tell people these stories, and it's a horrible story. It's a shameful story. Please don't isolate. Have the courage, and pray about this, but have the courage to talk to one person, somebody that you trust, somebody definitely that you trust, and be with some healthy people. That's why Brave One Community is so good there. Find a safe group, okay? Find people who understand, because a lot of people may not understand. Sometimes they give really bad advice. I'll just be honest with you. Now, I'm a pastor type, but that doesn't mean that all pastors give good advice on this one, okay? Well, just try harder, or, change your hair, or whatever. No, that's not the deal. You want to be in a safe group. Stand in your story. Now, she talked about this in terms of, truly understanding when you stand in your story, it's healthy to value your own viewpoint. Am I crazy? I mean, of course, that's going to be normal. No, you're not crazy. Stand in that and walk through that. Keep private records, okay? Well, and partly what that means is write this stuff down. I'm one who, every day, as some of you know, I do a journal, and it's simple. I taught it when I was in youth ministry. Acts, adoration, confession, thanksgiving, and supplication. And then I kind of do some journaling. I find that it's healthier for me to journal. Well, if I'm going through a tough time, my journal is that Acts thing, but then it also has just the stuff I'm going through. I wouldn't even want you to look at it because I'm kind of whining and complaining and, whatever. But, it really helps me. It helps me in my relationship with my wife. It helps me with my relationship with my kids, with people in our ministry. So, that's something you want to do. So keep private records. Say hello to your body. I love that she said this. You know what? Listen to your body. We didn't talk much about the body in this, but she talks a lot about how even this affects your body, of course. But even, my goodness, if you've been inside because you're curled up in a ball and you can't get out, please try. Just go outside, breathe some fresh air, take a walk, do some exercise. It's not going to heal you, but it's going to be part of the process of taking your truth back, okay? So anyway, say hello to your body. I love that phrase. Press into your faith. For a lot of people, when they've had betrayal or when they've had sexual abuse or when they've had other things, they say, well, how could God be a loving God? You know what? The shortest verse in the Bible is Jesus wept, right? Well, he wept at the death of a friend. I want you to know something. When you're being betrayed, I think our God weeps for you. I honestly do. In fact, my eyes just kind of welled up with tears. You can't see it on the podcast, of course. But the point that I'm saying is, no, he weeps for you, and he doesn't. He wants you to come close to him, draw close. He says, "I will never leave you or forsake you." And I know a lot of you felt left and forsaken. I get it, but that's not what he says. And go back into it. Sheri says, even in that section, read the Psalms, read some Proverbs. Those are good things to kind of get started, and then be patient with yourself. Okay, your confidence can and will be restored, but you're going to have to lean into it. Okay, so anyway, great 8 steps to taking your truth back from the book, Intimate Deception. More great advice than is just in that book. And so, go get the book. If you need help, do not hesitate to reach out. You can always come to homeward.com. We love you. The reason we exist is to come alongside you. We're a nonprofit. We're grateful for so many people who support the ministry, who bring all of this together so that we can do that. And, pick up her book. If you've got to connect with Homeward. If this is your story, then obviously connect with Sheri. Well, thanks again for listening. Thanks for watching. Until next time, I'm Jim Burns, and you are listening to Homeward.